Ambassador Shi'rala had lived 417 years without being touched. Not once. Not ever. Not a handshake, not a pat on the shoulder, not even an accidental brush of fingers passing a data pad. Then Marcus Chen hugged her by accident. What happened next would break a 4,000-year-old civilization and rebuild it into something better. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. 3 months before the incident, Marcus had walked into his first meeting with Ambassador Shi'rala and completely forgotten how to form coherent sentences, which was problematic, considering his entire job as a diplomat was literally forming coherent sentences. She was just stunning. That's the only word that fit. Imagine if someone took the concept of beauty and decided to show off. That was Shi'rala. Tall, maybe 6.5 feet, with skin that looked like liquid moonlight. It shifted colors depending on the light. Silver, blue, sometimes this pale lavender that made your brain skip. Her face had these high cheekbones, full lips, and enormous eyes that were completely black. No iris, no pupil. Just endless darkness that somehow reflected everything back at you. You looked into them and saw yourself staring back. But it was her hair that really got you. Except it wasn't hair. It was thousands of thin, crystalline strands that moved on their own. Not like wind was blowing them. They just flowed, constantly moving, catching light like fiber optics. Like she was permanently underwater. Like someone had weaponized beauty and given it sentience. She was alien enough to make your hindbrain whisper danger, but human enough to make the rest of your brain go, hello there. You're staring, Ambassador Chen. Marcus had jerked back to reality, his face burning. Sorry, the briefing photos didn't really capture my stunning beauty? Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but somehow it carried across the entire room. I was going to say prepare me for the convergent evolution thing, but sure, we can go with your version. The corner of her mouth had twitched. Just barely. The Valkyrian humans share similar body structure. Evolutionarily efficient. But don't mistake similar appearance for similar anything else. That should have been his first clue. The Valkyrie were nothing like humans where it mattered. They lived for centuries. They communicated through pheromones, literally talking to each other through chemical signals humans couldn't even detect. They had 3 hearts, blood that ran slightly purple, and apparently no concept of personal boundaries when it came to standing close. But the biggest difference? They didn't touch. Not each other, not other species, not ever. Physical contact was purely functional. For eating. For manipulating objects. Not for comfort. Not for connection. Definitely not for communication. Shi'rala had explained this very clearly in their first week working together. Very professional. Very direct. Do not touch the Valkyrie, Ambassador Chen. We don't do that. Understood, Marcus had said. Hands to myself. No problem. And for 3 months, he'd been perfect. Professional. They'd worked together on Earth's application for full council membership. Late nights reviewing trade agreements. Long discussions about bridging the gap between a species barely 3 centuries into space travel and a galactic community that had existed for millennia. They'd become something. Not friends, exactly. The Valkyrie didn't really do friendship the way humans understood it. But colleagues who genuinely enjoyed working together. 2 people who'd figured out how to communicate despite coming from completely different worlds. And then the council voted. Preliminary approval for Earth's membership. It was huge. Unprecedented for such a young species. Marcus had been so excited he'd literally sprinted to Shi'rala's office, burst through the door. We did it. The council voted yes. Earth's getting membership. And Shi'rala, perfect, controlled, 400-year-old Ambassador Shi'rala, had looked at him with those bottomless black eyes, and for just 1 second, something cracked in that alien composure. Joy. Pure, unfiltered joy. Marcus's brain shut off. 3 months of careful professional distance gone. He crossed the room in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms. Shi'rala went completely rigid. Every muscle locked. Her skin started glowing bright enough that Marcus could see it through his closed eyelids. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. But then Shi'rala made this sound. This small, broken noise from deep in her throat. And she leaned into him. Marcus's brain completely stopped working. She was leaning into the hug. The Valkyrie ambassador, who'd spent 3 months explaining how her species didn't do physical contact, was pressing her face against his shoulder and making sounds his translator implant was having an absolute meltdown trying to interpret. Her crystalline hair was moving faster, catching light, throwing rainbow patterns across his jacket. Her skin was glowing brighter, not like a lamp, but like moonlight on water, rippling patterns of silver and blue cascading across her arms. He could feel her breathing wrong, her chest moving in irregular rhythms. Was she dying? Oh God, was he accidentally killing her? Marcus pulled back fast, his hands up. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I forgot the protocols. You said no touching, and I just got excited, and I wasn't thinking. Shi'rala stared at him. Her eyes were wet. The black was literally glistening with moisture. Which shouldn't have been possible because the Valkyrie didn't cry, they didn't have human tear ducts. Except apparently they did because there was definitely water streaming down her face. What? Her voice cracked. Started over. What was that? Marcus blinked. What was what? That thing you did. With your arms around me. She touched her own shoulder where his hands had been, like she was checking if it had actually happened. What was it called? Oh wow, she didn't even have a word for it. A hug, Marcus said carefully. It's something humans do. For comfort. Or celebration. Or to show we care. It's physical affection. Showing emotion through touch. Through touch, she repeated slowly. Her hand was still on her shoulder, fingers pressing into where he'd held her. You pressed your body against mine. I felt your heartbeat. Your warmth. You surrounded me and I felt. She stopped. Those enormous dark eyes locked onto his face with an intensity that made him feel completely exposed. I felt safe. The words came out barely louder than breathing. You what? Safe. Shi'rala's voice was shaking now. For 2.7 seconds, I felt something I don't even have words for in my language. Like I wasn't alone. Like there was someone else in my space, and instead of feeling threatened, I felt protected. Held. Connected to another living being in a way that chemicals can't convey. She looked down at her hands. They were trembling. 417 years, she whispered. I've been doing this job for 417 years. Negotiations. Treaties. Peace talks. Always standing alone in conference rooms. Always carrying everything by myself. Always being the calm, logical voice while everyone else around me connects in ways I can't access because my species decided physical touch was primitive. Unnecessary. Her voice broke. And for 2.7 seconds, I wasn't alone. And now I know what I've been missing for 4 centuries, and I don't know if I can go back to not knowing. Marcus's throat felt tight. Shi'rala. Do it again. He froze. What? The hug. Do it again. She looked up at him, and the expression on her face was something he'd never seen there before. Desperate. Vulnerable. Raw. Please. I need to understand what that was. I need to know if I imagined how it felt. I need. Her legs gave out. Marcus caught her before she hit the floor. Whoa, hey, are you okay? No. She was gripping his arms, her fingers cool and slightly damp. No, I'm not okay. My chemical balance is completely disrupted. Every instinct says I should be angry. I should report you for protocol violation. I should maintain professional distance. I should. She looked up at him, tears streaming freely now. But I don't want any of that. I just want you to hold me like that again. Make me feel not alone again. Is that wrong? Am I malfunctioning? Because this feels like what insanity must feel like. Marcus helped her stand, but kept his hands on her shoulders. Steady. Supporting. You're not malfunctioning, he said gently. I think you're just feeling something your species trained you not to feel. That doesn't make it wrong. It makes it human. I'm not human. No. But maybe loneliness is universal. Shi'rala's breath hitched. Then please. Before I lose my courage. Before I remember I'm supposed to be professional and controlled and perfect. Just do it one more time. Marcus wrapped his arms around her. And Ambassador Shi'rala, 417 years old, veteran of 1,000 negotiations, architect of galactic peace treaties, completely fell apart. She didn't cry quietly. That was the thing that struck Marcus most. He'd expected, well, he didn't know what he'd expected. Maybe some dignified alien emotional release. Some controlled expression of feeling that he could politely ignore. Not this. Shi'rala was sobbing into his shoulder, like something inside her had shattered. Her whole body shook. The bioluminescent patterns under her skin went wild, flashing, pulsing, colors Marcus had never seen before racing across her arms and neck. Her crystalline hair whipped around them both like they were in a storm. And she was releasing pheromones. Even Marcus, with his pathetically limited human sense of smell, could detect them. Something sweet and sharp, and so profoundly sad it made his own eyes water in sympathetic response. It's okay, he murmured, one hand on her back, the other cradling her head. I've got you. Let it out. 400 years, she gasped between sobs. 400 years, and I never knew. I never knew what I was missing. I never knew I was starving. I know. I know. How do you do this? She pulled back just enough to look at him, her face wet, her eyes desperate and confused. How do humans do this? Touch each other like this? Share space like this? Don't you feel vulnerable? Doesn't it terrify you? Sometimes, Marcus admitted. But the alternative, being alone, that's worse. Is it? Her voice cracked. Because I've been alone for 4 centuries and it was fine. I was fine. I was functional and professional and perfect. But now I know what I was missing, and I don't think I can unknow it. And that terrifies me more than anything. Marcus understood then. She wasn't just crying from relief. She was crying from fear. Fear of needing something she'd lived without. Fear of being vulnerable. Fear of what happens when you let someone in, and then they leave. Hey, he said softly. One moment at a time, okay? We don't have to figure out everything right now. Just be here. Feel this. The rest we'll figure out together. She pressed her face back against his shoulder and held on like he was the only solid thing in a tilting universe. They stood like that for almost a minute. Marcus held her while she cried for centuries of loneliness out of her system. Her pheromones filled the room, grief and relief and joy and fear all tangled together into something so complex his translator implant gave up trying to interpret it. Finally, her breathing evened out. The sobs turned to hiccups, then to silence. She pulled back slowly, wiping at her face with shaking hands. I apologize, she said, trying to sound professional. It didn't work. Her voice was completely wrecked. That was extremely inappropriate. I shouldn't have. Don't, Marcus interrupted. Don't apologize for feeling something real. The door chimed. They both froze like teenagers caught making out. Ambassador Shi'rala? A voice called from outside. Another Valkyrie, speaking through the door calm. The council session begins in 20 minutes. Are you prepared? I'm detecting. Your chemical signature is highly irregular. Do you require medical assistance? Shi'rala looked at Marcus. He looked back. They both looked like disasters, her with tear-streaked face and wild hair, him with jacket covered in alien tear stains. I'm fine, Shi'rala called out. Her voice was still rough. Just processing something unexpected. I'll be at the session on time. Silence from the other side. Then, Ambassador, are you crying? Another pause. Longer this time. Is the human still with you? Yes, Shi'rala admitted. Did he harm you? No. He showed me something. A human custom called hugging. She struggled for words, profoundly affecting. The silence stretched so long Marcus thought maybe the other Valkyrie had left. Then, can I try it? Marcus and Shi'rala stared at each other. I'm sorry, what? Shi'rala said. Hugging. The thing causing your emotional response. The voice sounded younger now. Less formal. Ambassador, I've known you for 93 years. I've never felt you broadcast emotions like this. Not once. Whatever the human did, it made you feel something profound enough to completely override your professional conditioning. And a pause. I'm 93 years old, and I already feel like I'm drowning in isolation. If there's something that makes it better, anything at all, I need to know what it is. Please. Shi'rala walked to the door. Opened it. A younger Valkyrie stood there, female presenting, maybe 6 feet tall, with silver skin that had a slight green tint to it. Her enormous dark eyes were fixed on Marcus with an expression somewhere between terror and desperate hope. Please, she whispered. Show me. Her name was Liseth. She was barely a century old, practically a child by Valkyrie standards. She'd been assigned to the diplomatic corps 30 years ago and had been slowly suffocating under the weight of isolation ever since. I watch other species, she said, standing awkwardly in front of Marcus. The ones who touch, the Sorlim with their tail embraces, the Krianak who share heat, even the Tlari who link minds. Everyone has some way to feel not alone. Everyone except us. She looked at Shi'rala with something like betrayal in her eyes. You told me it was normal, that the loneliness was part of being Valkyrie, that I'd get used to it. Shi'rala's face crumpled. I believed that. I thought I had gotten used to it. But I was wrong, Liseth. We were all wrong. Marcus opened his arms. Come here. Liseth approached like she was walking toward either salvation or execution. She stepped into his embrace stiffly, every muscle locked with tension. Marcus closed his arms gently around her shoulders. Just holding. Just being present. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then Liseth made a sound like something breaking. Her knees gave out. Marcus caught her, lowering them both to the floor, and she buried her face in his shoulder and wept. But her crying was different from Shi'rala's. Where Shi'rala had sobbed with grief for time lost, Liseth cried with relief. Like someone who'd been holding their breath for 93 years and finally got to exhale. "Oh," she gasped. "Oh, this is what it feels like. This is what everyone else has. This is." She couldn't finish. Just held on and cried while her skin glowed so bright Marcus had to close his eyes against the glare. Her pheromones hit the air. And apparently, pheromones travel fast. Within 10 minutes, there were 5 more Valkyrie outside the door. Within 20 minutes, a dozen. By the time the council session was supposed to start, Shi'rala's office was packed with Valkyrie diplomats. Young and old, male and female presenting, all of them drawn by the chemical signature of profound emotional breakthrough. All of them wanting to try. Marcus hugged them one by one. Some cried. Some just stood there shaking, processing sensations they'd never experienced. One elderly Valkyrie, nearly 500 years old, simply whispered, "Thank you," over and over while tears streamed down his face. Another, a stern-looking ambassador named Kevtin, stood rigid in Marcus's arms for almost 30 seconds before his control finally cracked. When it did, he laughed. Just started laughing while crying, this broken, joyful sound that made everyone else start crying too from the sympathetic pheromone response. "I thought something was wrong with me," he said, pulling back to look at Marcus with wonder. "I've felt empty my entire life. 300 years thinking I was defective. Broken. But I wasn't broken. I was just alone." By the time the emergency council session was called, because apparently half the Valkyrie delegation missing a meeting qualified as an emergency, everyone in that room had been hugged. Everyone in that room was chemically broadcasting emotions, so intense the station's environmental systems flagged it as a potential biological hazard. And everyone in that room had the same look on their face, the look of someone who'd just discovered they'd been living in black and white their entire lives, and someone had finally shown them color. The council chairman, a 4-armed Krienike named Torshul, took one look at the Valkyrie delegation entering the chamber and stopped mid-sentence. "Ambassador Shi'rala," he said slowly, "why are all of you glowing? And crying? And releasing distress signals?" "Not distress," Shi'rala corrected, her voice still rough from crying but somehow stronger too. "Confused happiness. We don't experience it often enough to have a standard pheromone signature, so it reads as distress to non-Valkyrie." "Confused happiness? The human introduced us to physical contact comfort," Elder Torvas explained. He was 460 years old, usually the epitome of Valkyrie dignity. Currently, his eyes were still puffy, and he was standing way closer to Marcus than any protocol suggested. "It's called hugging, and it's completely revolutionized our understanding of emotional wellness." Torshul's surface temperature dropped several degrees, the Krienike equivalent of confusion. "Should we be concerned about this?" "Probably," Torvas admitted, "but we're doing it anyway." And that's when the Sorlim ambassador, a species that communicated through color-changing scales, turned yellow with curiosity. Could someone explain this hugging to those of us who haven't experienced it? Marcus looked at the assembled representatives from 17 different species, all of them now staring at him with varying degrees of interest. He'd accidentally started something, and there was no putting this particular genie back in the bottle. "Well," he said, "it's like this." Word spread through the diplomatic community like wildfire in an oxygen-rich environment. Within a week, Marcus had demonstrated hugging to 9 different species. Some loved it. Turns out the silicon-based Vextar found human body heat absolutely divine on their crystalline surfaces. Some were neutral. And some, like the methane-breathing Corval, physically couldn't participate but requested detailed explanations for academic purposes. Within 2 weeks, Earth had to send 5 more diplomats just to handle the demand for cultural exchange sessions on physical contact comfort. Within 3 weeks, the videos had spread to the Valkyrie homeworld. And that's when everything got complicated. The summons arrived via official quantum communication. Formal. Cold. Very, very serious. Ambassador Shi'rala and Ambassador Marcus Chun are hereby ordered to appear before the Valkyrie High Council to answer questions regarding recent breaches of cultural protocol and potential violations of the Cultural Preservation Act. Shi'rala read it 3 times. Her hands were shaking. "It's from Elder Kevris," she said quietly. They were in Marcus's quarters, something that would have been scandalous a month ago but now felt natural. She'd taken to spending evenings there, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. Constant small contact, like she was afraid if she stopped touching him she'd forget what connection felt like. Who's Elder Kevris? 700 years old. She helped write most of our current cultural protocols. Shi'rala struggled for words. She's the reason we codified non-touch into our diplomatic standards. She believes our species' greatest strength is our emotional control, our ability to remain objective and logical without the messiness of physical attachment. And now I've ruined 4,000 years of that in 3 weeks. Yes. Shi'rala looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting his worried face. Marcus, she has the authority to exile you from Valkyrie space. Permanently. She could declare you a cultural threat and bar Earth from council membership. She could. I'm going, Marcus interrupted. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He took her hand. That gesture had become automatic between them. Shi'rala, I'm not letting you face your people's judgment alone. We started this together. We finish it together. Something shifted in her expression. Her bioluminescence flared brighter for just a moment. Together, she repeated softly, like she was testing the word, like it meant something profound in ways Marcus didn't fully understand yet. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Shi'rala did something that still made Marcus's heart skip. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I'm afraid, she admitted. Not of Kevris. Not of the council. I'm afraid that they'll be right. That what we're doing is making us weaker. More vulnerable. That I've compromised 4 centuries of perfect professionalism because I couldn't handle being alone. Hey! Marcus shifted so he could look at her. You spent 4 centuries being alone. Being perfect. Being everything they wanted you to be. And you were miserable. I could see it the first day I met you. This beautiful, powerful, ancient being who looked like the loneliest person in the galaxy. I didn't know I was lonely, she whispered. I thought that was just what existence felt like. And now I know the difference. Now I've felt what it's like to not be alone. And I don't think I can go back to pretending that isolation is the same as strength. She lifted her head, looked at him with those endless dark eyes. Marcus, what if they make me choose? Between my position and this? She gestured between them. Between serving my people the way they want and having something real for myself. Marcus wanted to say something reassuring. Something diplomatic. But he'd learned that Shi'rala valued honesty more than comfort. Then you choose what makes you feel alive, he said. And we figure out the rest as we go. She studied his face for a long moment. Then carefully, she was still learning, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. It was clumsy. Her lips were cooler than human temperature. She held it a beat too long, uncertain when to pull away. It was perfect. Thank you, she whispered when they parted, for ruining my perfectly ordered life in the best possible way. Marcus smiled. Anytime. But as their ship prepared for departure to the Valkyrie homeworld, neither of them could shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. And that maybe, possibly, they were about to lose everything they'd found. The Valkyrie homeworld was beautiful enough to hurt. Crystal spires that grew instead of being built, reaching kilometers into a pale green sky. Bioluminescent gardens that pulsed with light in rhythm with the planet's magnetic field. Architecture that flowed like living things, because it basically was. The Valkyrie didn't construct so much as cultivate over decades. But it was the people that made Marcus's chest ache. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Moving through the streets in perfect precision, maintaining careful distance from each other, never touching, never connecting. A civilization of millions, and everyone was completely alone. It's like watching beautiful statues pretend to be alive, Marcus murmured as their shuttle descended. Shi'rala's hand found his squeezed tight. We were alive. We just didn't know we were barely surviving instead of thriving. There's a difference. The landing pad was surrounded by guards. The ceremonial kind that were definitely not ceremonial right now. And standing in the center, arms crossed, face carved from disapproval. Elder Kevris. She was. Marcus had thought Shi'rala was beautiful. Kevris was something else. 700 years had refined her features into something almost painful to look at. Perfect symmetry. Perfect proportions. Like evolution had spent millennia creating the ideal form, and this was the result. She was also radiating anger and chemical signals, so strong even Marcus could smell them. Ambassador Shi'rala. Ambassador Chun. Her voice could have frozen water. You will accompany us. Now. No greeting. No diplomatic courtesy. Just immediate escalation. Great start. They were escorted, marched, really, through the city to the High Council building. The guards didn't need to touch them to convey the message. You're not in control here. You're not welcome here. You're here to answer for what you've done. The council chamber was designed for intimidation. 17 massive thrones arranged in a circle, each elevated so the elders could literally look down on you. Shadows everywhere. Cold crystal floors that reflected distorted images back at you. Real, you're getting judged, and you're going to feel small about it, energy. Marcus and Shi'rala were directed to 2 chairs in the center. Spotlight on them. Darkness everywhere else. Theater of judgment. The 17 elders filed in, all ancient, all beautiful in that ageless alien way, all wearing expressions of varying degrees of disapproval. Elder Kevris took the highest throne. Center position. Alpha status clear. Ambassador Shi'rala, she began, her voice echoing through the chamber. You stand accused of severe violations of cultural protocol. You engaged in repeated physical contact with an alien species. You displayed uncontrolled emotional responses. You broadcast pheromones of such intensity that half the diplomatic station required chemical rebalancing. She paused, letting that sink in. And then you encouraged other Velkari to engage in the same behavior. You undermined 4,000 years of carefully maintained cultural practice. You introduced chaos where we had order, weakness where we had strength. Kevris turned her gaze to Marcus. It felt like being examined by a predator. And you, Ambassador Chin, you're accused of cultural manipulation, of deliberately exploiting Ambassador Shi'rala's isolation to create emotional dependency, of attempting to destabilize Velkari civilization through psychological infiltration disguised as friendship. Her voice dropped, colder. The penalty, if found guilty, is permanent exile. Shi'rala, you will be stripped of your position and barred from diplomatic service. Ambassador Chin, you will be declared a cultural threat. Earth's council membership will be suspended indefinitely. She leaned forward. Do you understand the severity of what you've done? Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but Shi'rala stood first. Yes, she said clearly. I understand perfectly. I violated 4 centuries of protocol. I showed emotions publicly. I encouraged others to do the same. I did all of it. She looked up at Kevris without flinching. And I would do it again. Because what you call strength, Elder Kevris, is actually just loneliness with better marketing. The chamber went absolutely silent. Excuse me? Kevris's voice could cut diamond. You heard me. Shi'rala's voice was steady now. Strong. I've served this council for 417 years. I've negotiated treaties that shaped the galaxy. I've prevented wars. I've been perfect. Professional. Everything you told me I should be. Her bioluminescence flared. And I've been dying inside the entire time. Slowly. Quietly. Professionally dying while telling myself it was normal. That everyone felt this empty. This alone. This convinced that existence was just endurance. She turned to address all 17 elders. Until someone touched me. And I realized I wasn't strong. I was just surviving. There's a difference. Elder Torval, ancient, withered, 712 years old, shifted in her throne. Ambassador Shi'rala, she said, her voice careful. You're suggesting our entire civilization has been wrong. For millennia? I'm suggesting, Shi'rala said gently, that maybe we confused isolation for independence, emotional control for emotional health, and cultural preservation for cultural stagnation. She looked at Marcus, drew strength from his presence. I'm suggesting that we've been so afraid of vulnerability that we removed the possibility of genuine connection. And in doing so, we removed our ability to be fully alive. This is ridiculous, Elder Kevris said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. We're not dying. We're thriving. We've built the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. When was the last time you were happy? Marcus interrupted. Every elder turned to stare at him. You didn't interrupt the High Council. You definitely didn't interrupt Elder Kevris. Marcus stood anyway. Not satisfied, he continued. Not content with an accomplishment. Actually genuinely happy. When was the last time any of you felt joy? Silence. Long and heavy. We don't require joy to be effective, Kevris said, but something in her voice wavered. Maybe not, Marcus agreed. But you require it to be alive. There's a difference between surviving and living. Between being functional and being whole. He looked around at all 17 elders. I've hugged 12 members of the Velkari diplomatic corps now. And every single one of them had the same reaction. They cried. Not from pain. From relief. like someone who'd been holding their breath for centuries and finally got to exhale, like someone who'd been starving and didn't know it until they tasted food. His voice softened. You're not thriving. You're just very, very good at pretending emptiness is the same as strength. Elder Torval stood slowly. Like it hurt. Like every movement cost her. 712 years of age, in every careful step as she descended from her throne. The other elders watched in shock. You didn't leave your throne during proceedings. It violated every protocol. Torval didn't care. She crossed the chamber floor, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Got close enough to Marcus that he could see the fine crystalline patterns in her aged skin, the deep exhaustion in her eyes, the way her hands trembled. I don't understand what I'm asking for, she said quietly. I don't have context for it. I've watched the videos. I've read the reports. But I don't understand how physical contact from a stranger could cause such profound emotional response. She paused, gathering courage. But I've lived for 712 years. I've negotiated the Treaty of Vascara. I've stood unmoved while my homeworld burned during the Corval raids. I've buried 3 generations of students and never shed a tear. I've been strong. Perfect. Everything our civilization taught me to be. Her voice cracked. And I can't remember the last time I felt anything except duty. Can't remember the last time I wasn't alone. Can't remember feeling anything real. She looked up at Marcus with eyes that held 7 centuries of exhaustion. So please, show me what I've been missing. Let me understand what you've given my people. Because if it's this powerful, if it's this transformative, I need to know what I'm fighting. Or what I should stop fighting. Marcus looked at Shi'rala. She nodded, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. He opened his arms. Elder Torval stepped into them like someone stepping off a cliff. Like someone making a choice that couldn't be unmade. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. She stood rigid, processing the sensation of another being's warmth, another heartbeat close to hers, arms creating a barrier between her and the universe that somehow felt like safety instead of constraint. Then something inside her shattered. She made a sound, high, keening, broken, that didn't belong in a council chamber. A sound that 700 years of control couldn't contain anymore. Her legs gave out. Marcus caught her, held her up, and she buried her face in his shoulder and sobbed. Not politely. Not with dignity. She howled. 7 centuries of suppressed emotion pouring out in great, racking sobs that shook her entire frame. Her pheromones hit the air like a chemical bomb. Grief and joy and loneliness and relief all tangled together into something so overwhelming that half the elders started crying too just from the sympathetic response. I've been so alone, Torval gasped between sobs. So alone for so long and I didn't even know. I thought this was normal. I thought everyone felt this way. Empty and cold and just enduring. I thought I was strong. But I wasn't strong. I was just. Her words dissolved into another wave of sobbing. I was just so tired of carrying everything by myself. The council chamber was dead silent except for her crying. 17 of the most powerful beings in Valkyrie civilization, watching one of their eldest completely fall apart in the arms of a human diplomat. And then Elder V.S. Kala stood. 500 years old. Dignified. Professional. Her entire career built on maintaining perfect composure. She descended from her throne. I want to try, she said simply. Then Elder Morthats. Me too. Then another. And another. Within 5 minutes, 12 of the 17 High Council members were standing in line, waiting their turn to be held by a human they'd been judging just minutes before. Only Kevris and 4 others remained seated, watching their carefully ordered civilization crack open right in front of them. Marcus hugged them all, one by one. Each elder approached like they were approaching either salvation or destruction. Some cried quietly. Some screamed. One just stood there shaking silently, tears streaming down their face while they pressed against him like they were trying to merge with his warmth. Elder Kesvala, 300 years old, whispered, I didn't know, over and over. Elder Morthats laughed while crying, this broken joyful sound that made everyone's pheromones spike in sympathetic response. Shi'rala moved between them, catching the ones who couldn't stand afterward, holding them while they came apart, murmuring comfort in pheromone signals that Marcus couldn't smell but could see the effect of, others calming, breathing easier, finding equilibrium again. It took almost an hour. When it was done, 12 members of the High Council were sitting on the floor, not on their thrones, just on the cold crystal ground, leaning against each other in ways that would have been unthinkable an hour ago, holding hands, touching shoulders, maintaining constant contact like they'd discovered water after a lifetime in desert. Because that's basically what happened. Elder Kevris stood. Her hands were shaking. Her voice trembled with rage. "This is weakness," she said. "This is everything we evolved past. Everything we worked millennia to overcome. You've contaminated them. Made them dependent. Vulnerable. Compromised. You've destroyed." "Kevris." Elder Torval's voice was hoarse from crying, but firm. "Shut up." The chamber went silent. "You didn't tell the head of the High Council to shut up. Ever." Torval slowly got to her feet. Shi'rala helped steady her. "I've spent 712 years being strong," Torval said, looking directly at Kevris. "Being perfect. Being logical. Being everything our civilization said I should be. Following every protocol. Maintaining every standard. Being the ideal Valkyrie." Her voice broke. "And I've been miserable the entire time. Just absolutely, profoundly miserable. I just didn't know it, because I had nothing to compare it to. I thought emptiness was normal. That everyone felt this way." She gestured to Marcus. 3 minutes in that human's arms, and I felt more alive than I have in 7 centuries. And if that's weakness, then I choose weakness. If that's primitive, then I choose to be primitive. If that's wrong, tears started again. Then I don't want to be right anymore. She turned to the other elders on the floor. "I move that we acquit both defendants of all charges. I further move that we integrate physical contact protocols into our cultural practices. That we teach our people what we've denied them for 4,000 years. That we stop calling loneliness strength and isolation wisdom." "Seconded," Elder V.S. Kala said immediately. "Then more that's." Then another and another. 12 votes total. More than enough to pass. Elder Kevris's face was unreadable, but her bioluminescence flared with what Marcus recognized as fury. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "All of you. This will make us weak. Make us dependent on others. Make us vulnerable to manipulation. Make us." "Kevris." Torval's voice was gentle now. Almost sad. "When was the last time you were happy?" "I don't need to be happy. I need to be effective. Strong. I need to." "When was the last time you weren't alone?" Kevris's mouth opened. Closed. Her hands curled into fists. That's not relevant. We're always alone. That's how individuals function. We exist separately, we think separately, we suffer separately, Torval finished. For no reason except pride. Except fear of needing anyone. Except convincing ourselves that isolation is the same as independence. She walked toward Kevris slowly. Carefully. "Try it," she said softly. "Just once. If you hate it, we'll stop. We'll return to the old ways." "But Kevris, what if we were wrong? What if there's something better?" "There isn't." "How do you know?" "Because I've lived for 700 years perfecting our cultural protocols. I've dedicated my entire existence to being alone," Torval said. "You've dedicated your existence to being alone and calling it strength. To carrying everything yourself and calling it independence. To feeling nothing and calling it wisdom." She held out her hand. "Let someone help you carry it. Just for a moment. Just to see what it feels like." Kevris stared at the offered hand like it was a weapon. Like accepting it would undo everything she'd built over 7 centuries. Then slowly, so slowly Marcus almost missed it, she reached out. Their fingers touched. Kevris flinched, but didn't pull away. "Show me," she whispered. Not to Torval. To Marcus. "Show me what you showed them. Let me understand what I'm fighting." Marcus approached carefully. Kevris looked like she might bolt any second. Like a wild thing barely holding still. He opened his arms. She stepped into them. An elder Kevris, 700 years old, architect of modern Valkyrie civilization, head of the High Council, broke just like all the others. Kevris cried differently than the others. No screaming. No howling. Just silent tears streaming down her face while she stood frozen in Marcus's arms, her body shaking like it was trying to hold together against impossible pressure. "I was wrong," she whispered. So quiet Marcus barely heard it. 700 years. I was wrong the entire time. What happened next got broadcast across the entire Valkyrie homeworld, because apparently the trial was being streamed live. 6 billion people watched their High Council, all 17 elders eventually, embrace a human diplomat and cry. And then they started trying it themselves. First in the capital. 2 Valkyrie watching on public screens, making awkward, tentative contact. Then more. Then hundreds. By the time Marcus and Shi'rala left the council building, The streets had transformed into something unprecedented. Valkyrie everywhere touching each other, holding hands, hugging, some crying, some laughing, all of them looking shell-shocked and terrified and relieved all at once. For 1,000 years of isolation, ending in a single afternoon. I broke your planet, Marcus said, watching a group of young Valkyrie teaching each other how to hug. You freed it, Shi'rala corrected, squeezing his hand. Look at them, Marcus. When have my people ever looked this alive? 6 months later, the transformation was complete. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with confused whispers as the Valkyrie delegation entered holding hands. Not just holding hands, touching shoulders, arms linked, casually maintaining constant contact as they moved to their seats. Species that hadn't seen the Valkyrie in months literally stopped mid-conversation to stare. What happened to you? The Korean AK ambassador asked, their surface temperature fluctuating with confusion. We discovered we'd been doing everything wrong for 4,000 years, Elder Torval said cheerfully. She'd officially retired from the High Council after the trial, but stayed on as special advisor. Mostly so she could keep hugging people without it being weird. So we fixed it. You look different. We're happy, Shi'rala said simply. She was sitting next to Marcus, their shoulders touching, that constant contact that had become natural as breathing. Turns out that changes everything. Before regular proceedings, Torval stood with a proposal. The Valkyrie wanted to establish a department of physical cultural exchange, to study tactile communication across all willing species, to formally acknowledge that connection wasn't a weakness, it was a universal need. The vote passed unanimously. By session's end, Marcus had demonstrated hugging to 6 more species. 3 cried. All of them asked for more information. That evening, Marcus found Shi'rala on the observation deck of their quarters, staring at the stars. You okay? He asked, coming to stand beside her. Just thinking. She didn't look at him, but her hand found his automatically. 6 months ago, I didn't know your name. Now you've revolutionized my entire civilization. Made my people happier than they've been in recorded history. Changed everything. We changed everything, Marcus corrected. I just accidentally hugged you. You're the one who had the courage to admit it meant something. She finally turned to face him. The starlight caught in her crystalline hair, making her glow. Marcus Chun, she said slowly, like she was tasting his name. Do you know what the Valkyrie word for love is? His heart stuttered. No, we don't have one. We had words for duty, obligation, genetic bonding. But not love. Not the way humans mean it. She stepped closer. I've been trying to find the word for what I feel when you're near me. When you hold me. When you look at me like I'm the only person in the universe who matters. She took both his hands in hers. I finally figured it out. There is no Valkyrie word. Because we've never felt this before. So I'm using the human one. She looked directly into his eyes. I love you, Marcus Chin. I love you for accidentally breaking 4,000 years of tradition. I love you for showing me that needing someone isn't weakness. I love you for making me feel alive for the first time in 400 years. Marcus's throat felt tight. I love you too, even though you're still kind of terrible at kissing. She laughed and hit his chest lightly. I'm improving. Debatable. Rude. She kissed him anyway, better now, after months of practice. Still slightly awkward because their mouths weren't quite designed for each other. Still absolutely perfect. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, while outside the window 17 species navigated coexistence. All of them learning. All of them growing. And on the Valkyrie homeworld, 6 billion beings who'd spent their lives in isolation were falling asleep touching each other for the first time. All because one human diplomat forgot professional protocol. All because sometimes the most important thing you can do is reach out and remind someone they're not alone. All because connection, real, physical, undeniable connection, isn't a weakness. It's what makes us alive.